Now it would be kind of exceptional to be committed to going every weekend often. And this church, this building, ceased to function as the Church of Ireland place of worship in 1982, I think, John, is it? Yeah. And it was Archdeacon Wallace that lived up there opposite the... But 'tis lovely that in view of all that has happened in the last 30 years, that we're back here. And just in the last number of months, half a year, through family connections with Duagh Parish, I had the pleasure of meeting Bob. And just when we met at the start, he was so, it was a sad occasion, relatives of his wife and Duagh, and they're close friends always. Two sisters died within a short space of each other, and it was just his sheer way of being with us and the way he valued what we did. And I said, there's something happening here that we need to be in touch with. So because of the extraordinary work he does, I asked him to come along and share with us something of what he perceives as the challenge for being a Christian. So thank you for coming. But Bob, I want to thank you in particular for coming, because he's flying out tomorrow morning from Shannon, and he flew in this evening. And I gave you a general title to work from, but his way of working is this. Isn't that the advantage in coming late? You tend to get the first seat. And you know, Bob, I even find that police conferences and everything, it's the front seats that don't fill up at all at the start. So, can I tell you how welcome you are? And tough water road.
Well, you know, so that's too bad, you know. The plan for the evening is that I'm going to speak for a little while. I'm going to say some prayers, and then we're going to have a free-for-all that we can ask questions and really just interact with one another. And I'm promising that we'll be at the tea by 9 o'clock. All right? And if you're good, you get a tea, and I'm told the vicar of the parish here has told me that if you're good, you get a Kimberley biscuit. And if you ask a question and you're involved in things, then you get a coconut cream. So that's good. As Father Pat has said, it's been a pleasure getting to know him and just being around with him and with others and seeing members of the family. What I'd like to do tonight, though, is to try and put some of the things that I want to say, perhaps a bit more, into the context of what's happening now. And by what I mean by what's happening now is to say something about what I perceive as some of the issues and some of the things that are around in terms of what's happening in Rome at the present moment. Because we are living in quite an extraordinary time. And I think it would be wrong in the context of this Lent and what I'm wanting to say, not to recognise that there are lots of questions, lots of tensions, in fact. And when you come from Scotland at the moment with all the kind of church news around in the Scottish context, it would be wrong simply to pretend that those issues are not around as we're thinking about what it means to witness in that kind of situation. One of the things that I've been doing, given the resignation of Pope Benedict, was that I went back and I read, I'm almost finished, reading an extraordinary novel by Morris West, and it's called The Shoes of the Fisherman, and maybe a number of you have read that before. I thought I'd begin just by recalling one or two things. It's a novel, so it's make-believe. But early on in the novel, two cardinals are having a conversation, two of the senior cardinals. And this is part of their conversation. One says to the other, "The Romans and the Irish, we're great plotters and great builders, but we lose the inwardness of things quicker than anybody else. Stick to the book. No meat on Fridays, no sleeping with your neighbour's wife, and leave the mysteries to the theologians. It isn't enough. God help us, but it isn't. The other cardinal responds by saying, "You're asking for a saint. I doubt we have many on the books just now." I'll show you. I want to lead you back to God. Understand this. Understand it in mind and heart and obedient will. What we are for the service of God through the service of man. If we lose contact with mankind, suffering, sinful, lost, confused men crying in the night, women agonizing, children weeping, then we too are lost, because we shall be negligent shepherds who have done everything but the one thing necessary. So my question is of the city, and how shall I know him? He is sitting among the poor, covered with wounds. The others unbind all of their wounds at the same time, then bind them up again. But he unbinds one at a time and binds us up again, saying to himself, "Perhaps I shall be needed. If so, I must always be ready so as not to delay for a moment." The Messiah, the story tells us, is sitting among the poor, binding his wounds one at a time, waiting for the moment when he will be needed. So too it is for us as ministers of the gospel. Since it is his task to make visible, it is our task to make visible the liberation that sharing our pain and our suffering offers to others. But in offering our wounds, we don't expose all of those wounds at the same time, because then they are overwhelming. What we must do is to unbear, to expose our wounds so that we can be released to be with others. And the story goes on to tell us that the inquirer goes to meet the Messiah and comes back disappointed. Because what he says to the Messiah is, "I couldn't see him." He says, "Peace be unto you, Master and Teacher. Peace to you, son of Levi. When is the Master coming?" And he said, "Today." And the rabbi said, "What did he tell you?" He said, "Today he is coming, but I don't think he's come." And Elijah said, "This is what he told you. Today, if you would listen to his voice, he will come." It's how the voice we hear is the voice of love and compassion. For it's in these acts that we hear the voice of God most clearly, and we see God working so noticeably in that present moment. It's when we share the wounds that all of us endure at different times in our lives that God, I believe, is most powerfully in our midst. When we think of the challenge of being a Christian today, there is a real challenge about having the confidence to be able to share our own woundedness, to somehow expose the otherness of our own journey. God comes as the Spirit within us and among us, so that in our poverty we help those who are in poverty of some kind. In our experience of oppression, we bring good news to those who are oppressed in some way or other. Particularly, I want to say that in our brokenheartedness, we can bind the brokenhearted. And in the many experiences of captivity, which all of us have captivities, we proclaim liberty to those who are captive.
if you can always be cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can eat the same food every day and be grateful for it, if you can understand when your loved ones are too busy to give you any time, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you can relax without alcohol, if you can sleep without the aid of drugs, then you must be the family dog.